To the left-hand side for Vieira, who'll play it through to Gabriel Jesus, who's in here for Arsenal. Gabriel Jesus to finish it off. Oh, what a way to do it! Gabriel Jesus seals the points for Arsenal. He's back, and he's back with a bang.
Into the penalty area it goes. Gabriel's header, and it's into the back of the net. Arsenal take an early lead through Gabriel.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the daily Arsenal podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Happy Saturday to everybody. The sun is shining bright in North London. It's a wonderful day. I've had a cracking morning. I got up this morning. I went for a nice long walk, got a haircut on my way home, grabbed myself a drink, nice iced coffee as I was walking, enjoyed it, took in the sunshine, come home, and I've got no pressure today to do anything really, which is the kind of day that you want after a long old season. Looking forward to sitting down a little bit later on and watching the FA Cup final. Can you believe that Manchester United, who have supposedly turned the corner under Ineos and are going to be run much, much better, have allowed it to come out that Erik ten Hag is going regardless of the result today? I mean, the timing of that, it came out yesterday afternoon, Friday afternoon, shocking. Really, really poor form. I don't think he's the right manager for them. I don't think he's the guy that's going to restore the former glories of Manchester United. But I just think that's so grubby to allow that to come out the day before the cup final. It's just horrible, isn't it? I feel for him. I do a little bit. I mean, he'll probably tell you that the main problem this season was, of course, that Garnacho goal at the Emirates that was ruled out. But yeah, anyway, less said about that, the better. Let me say a few hellos to those of you joining us in the live chat at the moment. Mohammed says, big up, Harry. He says, I always send you messages on the live show. Do not know why you don't see them? I see them all, my friend. I just can't reply to every single one in the middle of the pod. So I do see them. Sometimes they just pass me by in the chat while I'm maybe making a point. And then it's a bit of a lottery which ones I turn to. What else have we got? Jabba Dabba Doo, our resident Newcastle fan, is back. Good to see you. Big hello to Temi. We've got Black Shine with us. Simbarashe is with us, watching us from Zimbabwe. We've also got Rob joining us from New Zealand. Evan Hood has a question, which I'm going to save and we'll come back to a little bit later on. Big hello to Wesbird, to Mark, to Angela T, who's joining us from Australia, I'm assuming, based on the flag. And, of course, a big hello to Gooner73, who says, sounds like Harry will get the barbecue fired up later. Do you know what? I'm not today. I'm not, because I've got family round on Monday and on Tuesday for barbecues, family and friends. So I'm not going to do it today because I don't want to get sick of it. I'm just going to put my feet up today, chill out, probably here in the man cave, away from the noise that the kids make. I'm going to have a nice cold beer and I'm going to watch the FA Cup final. We've got Puran joining us from India. Nicholas joins us from Sweden. We've got the Gaming Boys joining us from Australia as well. Humble Columbus says, just on that point I made about Erik ten Hag before we dive into the Arsenal stuff, Harry, realistically, how could Manchester United keep that news from getting leaked? It didn't come from Ineos. It came from the Chelsea side. Why the hell do Chelsea know what's going on at Man United? That doesn't make any sense to me. Why would it come from the Chelsea side? Are you saying that it's to do with the fact that both of them are said to be interested in Kieran McKenna? Is it to do with the fact that maybe, well, it wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that Man United might be interested in Pochettino because Pochettino's left Chelsea. So I don't really know why it would have come from the Chelsea side. I just think that on the eve of a cup final, yeah, you should do everything within your power to keep that kind of thing under wraps. I guess if it didn't come from Ineos, there is a possibility that it came from someone in the dressing room. We know that there have been leaks from Man United for a little while. So maybe it was out of their hands, but I just think it's a bad look for Ineos because Erik ten Hag's been saying, you know, they've told me that they're going to continue with me next season, that they want to change everything and that we're going to do it together next season. And then this comes out ahead of a game that could ultimately salvage Manchester United's season, really, couldn't it? Because it's not been a great campaign for them. I don't think anybody would deny that. But they've obviously got an opportunity to finish the campaign with a bit of silverware. Wesbird says, we are sitting enjoying the sun at our static home, which is the only sun we've had this week. Yeah, just lap it all up, take it all in. Okay, let's dive into our first story today, and we're going to discuss the future of Thomas Partey. According to a number of reports yesterday, mainly from Fabrizio Romano, Arsenal are planning to move Thomas Partey on this summer. That's what it looks like. We suspected that that might be the case. You know, he's going into the final year of his contract. We've talked about this quite a bit recently. You know, there are going to always be concerns about Thomas Partey's ability to stay fit and available for us. You know, he did come back towards the end of this season, and instantly when he came back into the team after shaking off a little bit of the rust, you could see what we were missing in terms of his ball progression, in terms of his intelligence, his dominance, etc., etc. I would argue that in the last 3 games of the season, he started to tail off again in terms of his physical level, which worries me, because if you can't sustain that level over a period of 7-8 games, then what are we going to do with you, quite frankly? We've already got one midfielder who I don't think is physically up to it, but obviously is a really intelligent footballer and can be of great use if he's managed right. That's Jorginho, and we've given him a new contract. For me, it was only one or the other. You were only going to keep one or the other. There was no chance that Arsenal were going to keep both. And so I think it's probably going to be the case that Thomas Partey is going to leave the club this summer. We know that Arsenal are looking at midfield options. We've heard a lot about that as well already. The transfer window isn't even open yet, but all of that talk is, of course, in full swing at the minute. And that does suggest that Arsenal are probably going to spend a substantial amount of money on a midfielder. And I always talk about this. People always talk about transfer fees. And look, I don't think that we're going to get a massive transfer fee for Thomas Partey. I think you're probably looking at something in the region of 5 to 10 million. I honestly believe that. And I know people will say, stop undervaluing our players. I get it all the time. But genuinely, when you look at his age, when you look at the ongoing injury problems that he's had, when you look at the length of his contract at Arsenal in terms of what's remaining, how can you demand more than that and think that somebody in this current climate, in this current market, is going to come and pay you more than that? I think the most likely outcome is that he moves to Italy. We know that there are a few clubs in Italy that have been long-term admirers of Thomas Partey. Some have said Juventus feel like the best fit for him. Possibly Thiago Motta is about to take the job as the new Juventus boss. So does that have an influence on their transfer targets at this stage? Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. But if he doesn't move to Italy, I suspect Thomas Partey could be the next player to make the move to Saudi Arabia. As I say, we'll have to wait and see. But I am becoming more and more confident that Thomas Partey is going to be departing Arsenal this summer, based on the reports, based on some of the noises I'm hearing as well. And yeah, it looks like we're going to have to replace him. We're going to talk a little bit later on in the program about who might be the one to replace him. In fact, we're going to do that next after our short break. But yeah, it will be sad, because when he does eventually go, when I look back on Thomas Partey's career, I'm going to look back at a player that I thought was marvelous, that I thought was so special in terms of what he brings to his position. They used to call him the octopus at Atletico Madrid, because he used to sit in the midfield and just, you know, grab everything. It was as if he had 8 arms and he could just reach out and pull things in, intercept, always read the game exceptionally well. Came to the Premier League, looked brilliant from the very off, but very soon into his Arsenal career, those injuries kicked in, and it's been a struggle to keep him fit ever since. And, you know, he had a relatively good season last season in terms of making a lot of Premier League appearances, but again, towards the end of the campaign, his fitness levels massively tailed off. And after spending most of this season sidelined, he's come back. You'd have thought that he'd be getting fitter and fitter and fitter. And at the end of the season, I think we've seen a bit of a decline in his physical level, which suggests to me that he's just not robust enough to play A, Mikel Arteta's football, but B, in the Premier League, where it is undoubtedly the most physically demanding league in the world. I know a fair few of you have got an opinion on this. Rob says, once Jorginho signed, it was just a question of time before Partey went. Want to get money for him, but it's more about wages. That is the key point. Everyone will obsess over the transfer fee. And if we do sell him for £5 or £10 million, which I think is probably the most realistic outcome, there will be people out there that say, is that it? Is that all we got for him? It's terrible. It's not good enough. Edu, what are you playing at? But ultimately, the biggest saving and the thing that will give us the wiggle room and the ability to go out and replace him is getting him off the wage bill. Puran highlighting that Juve and Napoli are said to be interested in him. Wes Bird says, unless you can keep him on a pay-as-you-play contract because he's still quality when fully fit, then he's got to go. But that's sadly not going to happen. Agreed. There isn't going to be a pay-as-you-play arrangement put into place for Thomas Partey. I'm certain of that. What else have we got in the chat? Core Gamer Zone, who joins us from Kenya, says, concerning these signings, consider that we did not get to use Timber the whole season. Why would we break the bank with £100 million signings with that as a possibility? Yeah, but it depends on where Timber's come into play, mate. Like, I see Timber as being a part of our defense. Does he have the capability of playing in midfield? Yeah. So does Alexander Zinchenko, but we never see that happen. So, yeah, not sure about that. We're going to move on. We're going to take a really, really brief pause. When we come back, we're going to talk about the man being linked with replacing Thomas Partey, and we'll bring you the latest on that. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner with me, Harry Symeou. Now, one of the players that we are being linked with as a potential replacement for Thomas Partey is, of course, Newcastle United's Bruno Guimaraes. We've heard lots and lots about Arsenal's admiration for this player over the last few years, actually. If you remember, before he joined Newcastle United, he was being heavily linked with a move to Arsenal. When he signed for them, they made a big old song and dance of it, didn't they, on their announcement video, the fact that they had got him and we didn't. Now, there's a few reports going around about this at the moment. I'll just bring some of them to your attention. Team News and Ticks, who was on Charles Watts' show yesterday, who's been in the game for a little while. I love, by the way, his bio. This is probably the best bio I've ever come across on this app. 1 second, here it is. Spent years and thousands of pounds on a journalism degree, and I ended up leaking team news on Twitter. Amazing stuff. But basically, he said that positive talks had been held between Arsenal and is it between Arsenal and Newcastle? It's not really clear in this particular grab of this report. Is it talks between Arsenal and Newcastle, or is it talks between Arsenal and maybe Bruno Guimaraes' people? But according to Team News and Ticks, those conversations have taken place. A deal is nowhere near close at this stage, but there is some optimism that a deal can be done if, of course, Arsenal hit that £80 million release clause. Now, if you read what others are saying about this, it's a bit contradictory. This is where I'm struggling, because according to some, Bruno Guimaraes' release clause, which we know is only valid until the end of June, until the 24th of June, is set at the value of 100 million. So is it 80 million or is it 100 million? Because I think that makes a big difference. Also, according to this, the release clause can be paid in 3 installments. He wants to stay in the Premier League. But from speaking to a colleague who's a Newcastle fan the other day, I think they've got the impression as Newcastle fans that Bruno Guimaraes is not as dead set on remaining at Newcastle United as maybe Alexander Isak is. So there is some concern within their own ranks that he could leave this summer. Would I like him at Arsenal? Yes. Do I think he'd be a good fit? Yes. Do I think he's a massive S-house who, when he's playing against us, I can't stand him? Absolutely. But I would welcome this signing with open arms. It would be a little bit annoying that we would end up paying what we're going to pay for him if we do this deal, considering we could have had him before Newcastle did. But obviously, Arsenal decided to pursue other targets and other options at that point. You can't go back and you can't change the past, I suppose. But yeah, this is an interesting one. I think his ability to play both 6 and 8 gives us that flexibility that we quite like. No concerns around his ability to put himself about physically, and there's certainly no concerns on my part with regards to what he brings to the table technically. Good passer. I think he's got the intelligence to play at a much higher level and in a much more sophisticated system. And I think he's one of the players that maybe joined Newcastle United in the hope that the project was going to be really accelerated by the fact that they are such an incredibly wealthy football club. And the truth is, that hasn't really happened yet, has it? They qualified for the Champions League this season before last. That raised the levels of expectation. They weren't able to progress out of the group. And then as a result of that, they've struggled because of those games and the Premier League demands. Also, to be fair to them, they've had a bit of an injury crisis this season. And they've dropped off significantly in terms of their league position as a result of that. So it doesn't really feel like the Newcastle project is moving forward. So you can understand why someone like Bruno Guimaraes, who's given them what now, 2 seasons? Is it 2 seasons? Might feel that, perhaps it's time. Let's see what you guys are saying in the live chat box about this one. What have we got here? I know that Newcastle fans are not going to like this. A lot of Arsenal fans saying that they don't really like the guy. They don't really like the player. Goon R says Newcastle and Arsenal are tied together in this transfer window. It seems that way, doesn't it? Irfan Chowdhury says signing Bruno Guimaraes makes sense in every way. It's pointless signing an older midfielder because we'd be looking for one again in 2 years. Bruno can grow with Odegaard and Declan. It'll be a scary midfield. It would indeed. And I also think that the trick that we missed this season, if I'm sort of thinking about it now with hindsight, obviously we bought Declan Rice in and we bought Kai Havertz in and we utilized Kai Havertz as a left 8. And since Thomas Partey's return, we've utilized Declan Rice as a left 8. The truth is, I think that Declan Rice is better as a 6. The truth is, I don't think Kai Havertz is perfectly suited to being a left 8. Am I convinced that Fabio Vieira can do that job? Not really. Am I convinced that Emile Smith Rowe can do that job? Not really. So if we got someone like Bruno Guimaraes, who I feel is a more specialist 8, I say that he can play 6 and he can, but I feel like he's more suited to the 8 than Rice is. And then that means that you can move Rice back into his best position. He said before it's his best position as well. And I think that gives you the kind of balance that we had when we had Granit Xhaka again, only now with better players. It would be a scary midfield. Mark says, please don't sign him. He has an attitude problem and we don't need that in our dressing room. I don't know if he's got an attitude problem or if he's just an S-house that opposition fans are going to hate. We've got one of those in Ben White, and there's loads of players over the years that I've looked at and thought, man, if you were playing for my side, I'd absolutely love you, but you're not. So right now I despise you. But yeah, I don't think he's a problem. He's a problem player. I don't think he causes issues behind the scenes at Newcastle United. I just think he's been sold the idea of something that was going to move forward really, really fast. The reality of PSR kicked in. Newcastle had to wind it in a little bit. And as a result, they're not really moving forward in the or at the rate that they would have hoped to and liked to when, of course, the project was sold to him and various others. Guys, just a quick reminder before we move on. If you haven't done so already, please leave a like on the video. There are so many of you watching, but we've only got 54 likes on the board. Do you mind hitting that like button? Let's get it up to 100 ASAP. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're brand spanking new as well. That really, really does help. We've picked up so many subscribers over the last month, touching 1,000, which is amazing. So please do subscribe. It really, really does help. Leave me a review as well. Remember, we're trying to get to 1,000 reviews on Spotify. We're about 400 out. We're trying to get to 500 reviews on Apple Podcasts. We're a long way off of that, which when you think about the fact that most of our audio listeners tune in via Apple Podcasts is baffling to me. Just do it, please. It really, really does help. But look, short break, short pause. And when we come back, we're going to dig into a really, really big talking point. And this is based off of an update from Charles Watts earlier today about this particular player's future. We got to talk about Emile Smith Rowe. What is going on with Emile Smith Rowe? Is he going to leave? Is he going to stay? It looks like that's going to be decided very, very soon.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
Okay, let's talk about Emile Smith Rowe. I just want to bring up the post that Charles Watts put out earlier on today, in which he provided an update on Emile Smith Rowe. If you're not following Charles, make sure you are. He's brilliant. Certainly one of the best in the business. Make sure you give him a follow. It's on Twitter at Charles_Watts. Let me just bring this up to share it with you guys now. And while I'm doing that, let me know your thoughts in the live chat. Do you want to see this player stay? Is it time that he goes? Where are you at on the whole Emile Smith Rowe debate? Because it's a debate that's been going on actually for a little while, ever since he found himself struggling to work his way back into the team. So this is what Charles Watts posted earlier on. He said, talks scheduled between Arsenal and Emile Smith Rowe to decide on his future. They will take place imminently. Smith Rowe has a deep affection for Arsenal, but getting regular game time is now key to the 23-year-old. Look at it from Emile Smith Rowe's point of view for a minute. Let's do that first, and then we'll do it from the Arsenal perspective. This is a player who has had his fair share of injury problems recently, okay, and has fought long and hard to get himself back to fitness after that. We know that he had an ongoing issue that was causing him problems for a number of seasons, and they decided that the best way to try and rectify that and sort it and put it behind him was for him to undergo some surgery. The new Premier League season started. I say new Premier League, it's just finished, but the 23-24 Premier League campaign starts. And Emile Smith Rowe would have fancied his chances of getting back into the side somehow. And he was on the bench for the first 5 games of the season without coming on. Against Tottenham Hotspur in the 2-2 draw at home, he played 1 minute. And in the victory away at Bournemouth, he played 9 minutes. So he got 10 minutes, basically, in the first 7 Premier League games of the season. He then sat out the game against Chelsea and came on as a substitute on 22 minutes. And he played 73 minutes at home against Sheffield United before going off with an injury again. This time it was a knee injury, and that kept him out for another 6 games. Ever since then, more often than not, he's been an unused substitute. Okay, that's the reality for Emile Smith Rowe. If I look at his overall Premier League stats, he's played just 345 minutes in the Premier League this season. 13 appearances, no goals in the Premier League. I'm not going to get onto him about goals and assists because the guy's barely played. He's got 2 assists to his name, but no goals. But it just feels like he's such a bit part player at this club. And it's hard to kind of process and get your head around, because I remember a time when he was arguably one of our most important players. If you think back to that period at the beginning of the season that we finished 5th, so 3 seasons ago now, if you go back to the beginning of that campaign, Emile Smith Rowe was massive in that. When we lost those opening 3 games and we were in a really, really bad place, Emile Smith Rowe was the guy that, in my opinion, single-handedly dragged us out of that crap spell that we were in and elevated the level to a point where the team built a little bit of confidence. We started to move forward. And in the end, we had a good crack at Champions League football. We didn't get it in the end. But he was so, so important playing from that left-hand side. And then he had the injuries and the surgery, and it just feels like he's just been left completely behind since then. The team has evolved to the point where we're now looking for different things from our wide players. And so I've heard people say, well, he can be a left 8. He's an 8. I've never seen it personally. I'm sorry. Those of you that listen to this regularly will know that I've never really seen it. Emile Smith Rowe, the 8. It's harsh. It's horrible. It's the brutal nature of the business and of the sport. But I just don't understand what the point would be in keeping hold of Emile Smith Rowe now. He is a valuable asset because of the fact that despite not playing a lot of football, he still has a pretty good reputation. Obviously done wonderful things with England's under 21s. Obviously, is somebody that, can play in a variety of positions. I would argue that left 8 is not one of them, but he can play from a flank. He can play just off a striker. He can play as a more advanced midfield player. The homegrown factor comes into play here as well. It probably comes into play more than it should really when we're having these types of conversations, but it is a thing. And I just look at him and I think, yeah, maybe this is one of the players that we could sell on and move on. And like, despite that, despite not playing, despite being a bit part player and all the rest of it, according to Transfermarkt, he's still valued at about £20 million. Again, I know what you're going to say. How can you value him at £20 million? He's worth way more than that. I've heard some people saying 40, 50 million pounds for Emile Smith Rowe. We are not getting that, guys. We are not getting that. The guy's hardly kicked the ball all season and the season before. You are not going to get big bucks for Emile Smith Rowe now. Arsenal need to sit him down. They need to communicate to him, because it's got to be fair to him as well, what his role is going to look like next season. But that doesn't even guarantee anything, because things can change. Someone can get injured. Someone else can, perform really, really well, better than the manager expected. And that end up leaving you in the shadows and in the dark, etc., etc. It's a really difficult situation to manage. But ultimately, I think whatever way you look at this now, the right answer, the solution is, and the best thing for all parties is to part ways. Arsenal get their money and are able maybe to go out and bring someone in that they do think is going to be a part of the plans moving forward. Emile Smith Rowe gets to go somewhere where he is the main man or one of the main men, because his talent deserves that. And he's only ever going to fulfill that talent and showcase that talent on a regular basis if he's playing regular football. Because being in and out the way he is and getting so little opportunities. Like, I hear some Arsenal fans who I think there's two sides to this. I think you've got the Arsenal fans that are really attached to Emile Smith Rowe, desperate to see him succeed, and so would argue keep him at all costs. You've got the complete opposite end of the spectrum that are like, well, just get rid of him because we're not using him, so what's the bloody point? And then you've got people like me that are in between that are conflicted, because on the one hand, I'm thinking, you are a talent. I know it's there. I've seen it before. I know you love this football club. And what an amazing story it would be if you could get back on track and really stake your claim and make your mark. But I also know the reality is that the chances of that are so low at the minute that you might as well cash in, and you'd probably be doing him the best thing as well. If you really love someone, they say, let them go. And I guess that's kind of how I feel about Emile Smith Rowe. Let's see what you guys are saying on this. It's an interesting one. Wes says, Harry, him and Saka saved Arteta's job. They probably did. But that doesn't mean that Arteta has to or needs to kind of sit on him as a player and keep him for the sake of it as a result of that. Like, things have changed. Times have changed. Puran says, I would give him more game time. He deserves it. Again, this is another argument that Arsenal fans are constantly having among themselves. Like, should he have got more game time? But then look at the results that we produced this season. And then can you really argue with what Mikel Arteta decided if the team is performing like that and, putting that level of points on the board and scoring that many goals and all the rest of it? It's difficult to make the argument the other way, isn't it? Gunnar says Smith Rowe is worth 25 million. He's a bright prospect. He could definitely grow and improve. A player that is 100% worth keeping. Okay, this is the interesting bit though. You say that he's worth 25 million now. I make it about 20. Okay, but you say 25. Fine. For the benefit of this conversation, we'll stick on 25. He's worth 25 million today because his brilliance is in the past in terms of us actually seeing it, but it's not so far in the past that it can be dismissed. If he spends another season at Arsenal playing the exact same role that he has this season, a bit part player, hardly getting a look in, hardly getting a sniff, never able to build himself up to his full peak condition because he's just not playing football matches regularly enough, then what's he going to be worth next summer? Less than 10? So you would gamble half of his value just to keep him in case he gets the opportunity. If you're the manager and you don't believe he's going to get that opportunity, then you don't gamble on the value decreasing as it would over the next 12 months. You just make the sale. And that's the thing. Sometimes you have to sell while something is still in demand in order to get fair value. For example, Joe Willock. I remember when Joe Willock went on loan to Newcastle, done incredibly well. And I remember everyone saying, no, keep him. But it was obvious what was going to happen. Joe Willock would have come back to Arsenal, again would have been a bit part player, again would have struggled for game time. And over the course of that one season, he was back at Arsenal, sort of warming the bench, he would have lost his value, and he wouldn't have been the £35 million player that Newcastle bought. We got great money for Joe Willock. You know why? Because we sold when it was hot. We sold when it was the right time. And with Emile Smith Rowe, we're not in that fortunate situation where he's been playing well and he's got that reputation and people want him. So it's even more important that we sell while the value is still high. Blackshine says, I would love him to stay. However, I also want to see him in matches, displaying his skills. Let him go. He is young and he has plenty to offer. Channel 1 says he should have gone 2 seasons ago. Angela says, I hate the idea of Emile Smith Rowe leaving, but clearly there's something that Arteta doesn't trust because he's been fit but still doesn't play. It makes no sense to keep him. Also, why would he want to stay? Yeah, all valid points. Darren says, another career that Arteta's ruined. Come on. That's incredibly harsh. That is incredibly harsh. Angela asks, and this is a really good question, who do you rate higher, Emile Smith Rowe or Vieira? It's tough, isn't it? I rate them about the same, to be honest with you. I think that Fabio Vieira has got a wonderful left foot. He's got real good intelligence about his play. And I think he's another one that is in the kind of last chance saloon in terms of if he doesn't make an impact next season, then you maybe have to hold your hands up and say that that was a mistake. But I guess it doesn't really matter, Angela, which one I rate more. It's clear that Mikel Arteta rates Vieira more than he rates Emile Smith Rowe. And that's why he's given him so many opportunities ahead of Smith Rowe this season and last season. And I think that if he could only keep one, he's going to keep Vieira. He probably also thinks about the value piece, and Emile Smith Rowe being English, being homegrown, all of that stuff, being a Hale End Academy product probably carries more value as well. So, yeah, maybe that factors in. I don't think there's that much difference between the two players, to be honest, but that probably comes into play. Remember, Emile Smith Rowe's homegrown as well, so his sale would benefit the club a lot more than the sale of Fabio Vieira, who the club have spent quite a bit of money on. Big thanks to Jabba Dabadoo for their very kind super chat. Thank you so much, mate. Really appreciate it. It says good luck for next season, but leave out Isak and Bruno. Good luck to you guys too, especially if you're without both of those players because they're wearing red and white rather than black and white next season. I'm just pulling your leg. I don't think we'll get both. We might get one, maybe. We'll see. What else have we got? Gavin says keep Emile Smith Rowe for one more year. Just having a look. Tom says we need Emile Smith Rowe for depth. We are going to need all hands on deck for the upcoming competitions too. Do you think that the fact that we obviously are in the Champions League again and that there's a new format and that there's more games makes it easier for Mikel Arteta to convince some of these fringe players that they're going to get more game time next season? It might do. It might. You know, I just think that I don't know that this Champions League format is going to be any better, by the way. I know a lot of people said that the group stages were boring. But I do feel like this is going to be boring as well because there'll be some teams that win enough games early on to progress to the next round and then maybe take their foot off the gas a little bit, rotate a little bit, which would then decrease the level of the fixtures that they're playing as a spectacle. And maybe actually it doesn't achieve what UEFA were hoping it would achieve. But look, I'm going to be open-minded about it. We'll see what happens. But you're right. We do need depth. I just don't know if Emile Smith Rowe is a part of even that kind of backup department of our squad, if you like, because he just doesn't get on a lot, does he? And there's other players that seem to come on ahead of him, which is which is interesting to me. I've got another super chat from Nicholas who says Isak and Bruce for Ramsdale, Emile Smith Rowe, and Nelson. When he says Bruce, I think he meant Bruno. But look, this was another story I read yesterday, and again, I don't know how accurate this is, but there was a suggestion that Newcastle United, who we understand are quite interested in Aaron Ramsdale, won't pursue Aaron Ramsdale yet because they don't want to give Arsenal money that helps them offset the PSR issue and then allows them to create the wiggle room and the headroom and the space to be able to go out and get Bruno Guimaraes from them and activate his release clause. So I read yesterday that Newcastle do have an interest in Ramsdale, but they're going to wait until Bruno Guimaraes' release clause is no longer valid to try and pursue that because they don't want to basically hand Arsenal money to be able to then trigger that release clause. Interesting, isn't it? Really, really is. What have we got in the chat? Gary McRae is shouting at himself in the chat box. Hope you're well, Gary. It's the weekend, mate. Chill out. Enjoy yourself. And this is a good point that Guna73 makes. Should Nwaneri be in the squad next season? And if so, whose spot is he taking? See, I think Ethan Nwaneri will be in the first team squad next season. I don't know how much he'll play, but I think the idea is to have him in that group. And then, that's another player that wants to play where Smith Rowe plays or where Fabio Vieira plays, which makes it make even less sense to hold on to Emile Smith Rowe if you can potentially earn some value from him. But yeah, really, really interesting stuff. Thank you guys so much for joining me as always on this Saturday afternoon. I am going to go off now and enjoy the sunshine, spend some time with the kids before the FA Cup final creeps up on us. Thank you for tuning in as always, for your brilliant interaction. As always, just a quick recap of what we've discussed. Reports claim that Thomas Partey will be leaving Arsenal this summer. How much can we get for him? I don't think very much, but all the noise around us bringing in a midfielder suggests that, yes, someone is probably leaving outside of Mohamed El-Neni, and Thomas Partey could well be the one. Bruno Guimaraes has been linked with a move to Arsenal, with some suggesting that talks have taken place. Not clear if those talks were between Arsenal and Newcastle or Arsenal and the players' representatives, but the Gunners are hopeful that they could do a deal for the Brazilian. We'll have to wait and see on that. And Emile Smith Rowe is due to have imminent talks with Arsenal Football Club about his future. Will he be an Arsenal player come the start of the 24-25 season? I don't think so. Thank you for all your love. Thank you for all your support. Thank you to everyone that signed up as a Patreon in the last few days as well. Amazing to see the support. Really, really do appreciate it. If you want to go over there, the link is in the description below. You can sign up for free over the course of the summer, but if you'd like to go one further and support the pod, you can do that as well. And I really, really do appreciate it. What else did I want to say? Make sure you leave a like on the video. There's no reason why we shouldn't have at least a couple of 100 likes on the board by the time we end up the live, wrap up the live stream, I should say. Reviews on Spotify, reviews on Apple Podcasts, likes on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. You know the drill by now. And I will see you all on the next one, which will be tomorrow. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great Saturday. All the best. Goodbye.